Guys, it's Dave Duncan back from Metal Epidemic for another album review. And for this review, Duncan and I have been checking out the album from Norwegian metal band Big Muff 68. The band's new album, Swing Metal, will be released on May 6th via Mas-Kina Recordings. So, bit of info on Big Muff 68. I'm going to say Big Muff quite a lot in this review, just FYI. Bangkok, early 2000s. Henry Gibson meets Ron Dongery at the final fitting while visiting Taylor Balbir Surajitskul in Thailand. Their suits have an uncanny resemblance, so they decide to become male models in their home country of Norway. The 70s era three-piece suit model industry is a tough place to thrive, so the two hunks decide to spread their message of love for three-piece suits through swing metal music. There's only one problem: the genre swing metal hasn't been invented yet. So, to sort out the problem, they contact their other model friends, Chris Bartender, Bass Frehley, Biff Garner and Steve Cattens, Dolby Surround and 12-time organ champion Norge to help out. The name Big Muff 68 is chosen for the group, incidentally inspired by Chrissy's unfortunate night with a Ukrainian hopak dancer and the distortion pedal with the same name. 68, you ask? Well, that's the closest number to 69, which is a bit risky. Big Muff 68, now the founders of swing metal, it carries a lot of weight. They traverse the last century's musical decades and steal their best ideas. The groove of swinging drums of the 40s, the raunchiness of the 50s, the organ of the 60s, the stylish fashion of the 70s, the long hair of the 80s, and the metal of the 90s. Swing metal. So,
I'm going to say that never happened.
Well,
I'm going to say that that's a fabrication of some overactive minds, much coffee.
I don't want to say it's lies, but it's in the press statement. So it's in the press statement.
If it's in the press statement, it's 100% fact. It's fact. If you've read it in a YouTube video, it's fact.
As soon as I saw the band name,
Dave, it's flat.
Let's not get into that. As soon as I saw the band name, I was a little bit intrigued. I'm not going to lie. When I saw that, I was like, right, this is all my favourite things rolled into one band name.
A Big Muff.
Yeah, minus
and the number
1
68.
digit, obviously. And then I saw the album title, and I had like Nam-like flashbacks to earlier last year when we reviewed the last Diablo Swing Orchestra album.
Yes, we did indeed.
And the 2.5 that I gave that album.
Yes.
Hashtag.
I think I'd score a bit higher.
Harsh but justified. So I was kind of like, I was in two minds, you know. I was like, oh, okay, well, let's listen to the first track and we'll see what we're thinking after that. So, fired on the first track, and when it kicked in, I thought, those vocals are a little bit distinctive. I've heard that voice before.
Oh, right. So you knew this voice.
So I'm looking at the press release and I'm like, I don't recognise any of the band member names, but clearly they're all made up. But the press release did also mention that the band featured members of Insense, Shining, Beaten to Death, a band called Dødsvanger, and a band called Circus Maximus. And that's when the penny dropped. The vocalist, although not written anywhere, is 100% is Tommy from Insense and Beaten to Death. 100%, because I recognise that voice anywhere. Although,
this is how internet conspiracy rumours start, Dave. That's not what it says in the press statement.
It says his name is Henry Gibson on the press release, but I'm not believing that.
Henry Gibson after the guitar.
Not believing that.
Like heir apparent to the Gibson guitar fortune.
Regardless, anyway. So we'll listen to the album. Kinda love this album, Duncan.
Yep.
And I was a bit wary of the whole like swing metal genre tag.
It's not like for a group that uses parody in its blurb.
Yeah,
they're a surprisingly serious band.
Yes, 100% agree with you there. There's much more than meets the eye to this swing metal. There are elements of swing metal, but there is so much more going on here. There's a definite kind of progressive vibe. There's a bit of there's obviously metal in there. There's some rock. There's a kind of bluesy New Orleans type soul to this as well. And it's all kind of mixed up really, really well together. You can I could hear little kind of fragments of bands like their Insense or Circus Maximus kind of like seeping through just a little bit, and that's going to happen. But Big Muff 68 are 100% their own thing. I love hearing a band take a style or a genre and just kind of stamp their personality all over it, and I feel like that's what this band have done here with this album. Every track has a little bit something different. They like kicking things off with this kind of Louisiana street party vibe on the opener. Everything's okay. It's got really cool kind of blues metal riffs, a bit of organ. You've got some female gospel vocals. They've got the whole hand claps going in there as well, like the lot. It's a real like feel good opener, and I was pretty much sold at that point after that first track. But it really surprised me as the album went on, because this album kind of shows you all the different sides from this band throughout the release. You get a bit more of a kind of metal bite on Hammer for the Gods, which has the heaviness, but it's got that like a kind of like Freak Kitchen kind of melody and cheekiness to it, which is all over this album as well.
The guitar riff like reminds me so much of, and you're going to hate me for saying this, but it is very CKY.
Oh, right, okay.
Like hugely CKY, but in a good way, in a really good way, where it's just thick. Like just sounded like, in fact, it's actually very, like, the riff is 2 degrees separated from being an exact replica of a CKY riff, but they put their own spin with the rest of what they're doing, which makes it sound different.
Right.
But
okay,
I see what you did there.
Okay. You've also got some like massive choruses on these tracks.
Yes.
Tracks like "Run You Out," which will just get stuck in your head for days. And those melodies come delivered by, as I mentioned, the very talented Tommy Helm, aka Henry Gibson. I reviewed De-Evolution by Insense way back in the Rock and Roll Reviews days. And I remember writing in that review, my main highlight of that album were the vocals. And once again, he's kind of blown me away. I just love everything about this guy's voice. And the thing is, like, it's not a perfect vocal. Like, there's no auto-tune. There's no like.
That's rough.
It doesn't try and cover up any blemishes. It's just his voice in its natural form. Kind of take it or leave it. And I kind of love that about it. He has a lot of soul for like a kind of metal vocalist, and he does various styles on like all these different projects that he's with. And I said this on the Insense review as well, his choice in melody is so unique. It's so like different. He doesn't tend to go for the kind of predictable choice of melody. You know, like the tails of his melody, they take a very different direction than you'd expect. And it kind of throws you off the first time you hear it, because you maybe expect them to go for the kind of root notes. But same with his tone, like he can deliver it all. Like he does the big melodies, he's got the screams, he can do the tonal melody. I think he's a real asset to any band that he's in my opinion.
He's got a kind of the soulful tone. Reminded me of not a metal band at all, but there was that band that had that one song, and I'm sure they had albums, but I never listened to them. It was just that one song that was played all the fucking time. Band were called Reef. I remember.
Oh,
Reef.
Yeah.
Was it
Place Your Hands or Place Your Hands?
Yeah, Place Your Hands or whatever that song was. But he sounded like he shouldn't have been in that band.
Yeah.
Like the band were like an indie band, and he had this kind of more gruff gospel,
quite raspy.
I always kind of felt like that was a weird choice, but I worked on that song. It's kind of the same here, like where there's a whole lot of soul, there's a whole lot of blues, but those things should in essence naturally fit within metal, because metal's constructed on the building blocks of blues. But for whatever reason, it's distinct enough, mostly because of all the things he does vocally, the range, that makes it kind of feel like something special. Like it's one of those things where, like, and not sounding alike, but a kind of similar thing where you hear it, it shouldn't work, but it does work. It's like the first time you ever listen to Tool and you hear Maynard's voice, and you're like, "Why are you in this band?" Like that doesn't, and then you're like fucking 7 hours into the pot, and you're like, this could only be in this. It's kind of the same thing here. Like vocally, it's distinct enough that it could easily fit in about 17 different things. but it's so versatile enough that when he commits, like the end of Everything Okay, he releases the most punishing fucking roar that goes, I'm fairly sure it's looped. Fairly sure it's looped. I don't want to cast aspersions, but it goes, I've done a couple of long screams in my time, Dave, and I know where your voice is supposed to trail off, and it did sound like it was looped. But what I loved about it was when it finally does stop, he gives you about half a second, and he hits you with about another 3 seconds of exactly the same thing again, and I was just like, no, maybe that's whatever, right? That's cool. You know, he's just the fact he could switch to that, and he does that in several parts here, where he's hitting a more kind of mid-range, kind of soulful thing, but then I'll just drop it down and go into a very kind of deep, raspy, kind of more baritone level vocal with ease. It's honestly, it's like shifting a gear. It's worth me, like, because that's one of the elements where you can be the most versatile band in the world and switch up and come in with all your different genres that you want and all your different styles. If your vocalist can only really do mid-range vocals, that's always going to be the bit that's constant. And he seems to be able to have a dexterity to acclimate to the sounds around them, which, once again, did not know that you'd done a deep dive to find out who this guy was. It was going to be one of the things where it was like that. This guy's a new talent. Let's keep him on lock. So
I've been on this guy for a long time. Got a wee bit of a man crush, obviously, going with this review, but I think it, like, even the stuff he does with Beaten to Death, like, completely different to this. But what a voice this guy has. Another thing that I really like is there's a track called Pain Still Getting Stronger, which is a kind of almost like a ballad type track. And he gives this really, like, emotional kind of performance, but then towards the end of the track, he starts to let rip with some, like, really big screams. And his voice, like, hits that kind of breaking point where you can hear it starting to crack, but it almost, like, emphasizes the amount of emotion that's gone into those screams. It's like, wow, that was just, like, even though it was breaking, it was so cool. I really liked it. But the rest of the band also deserve a lot of credit here, because they're kind of pulling off a style and a vibe that for a bunch of Norwegians shouldn't sound this natural. Like,
styles.
What is going on? Yeah,
styles and vibe. It's not just that's the thing. Like, they're playful enough. Like, some of the guitar, like, hooks and licks are from, like you say, they just from genres and eras that shouldn't make sense to be coming out of like a Norwegian band. And like, and it's always its accent. It's like, it never is one song on this. Oh, this is their 50s swing ballad, and this is our. It's always just, it's a tinge. You know what I mean? It's like adding a spice to the tracks. They have a core sound, but they seem to be able to infuse their tracks without being like out and out replicas, and that's not, once again, not easy to do, because you have to be kind of like a master of. You're like not only the instrument you're playing, but like have a really good knowledge of the styles you're playing to be infusing without parodying. And that was the thing that kept kind of throwing me back, was every time I kind of got a feel for, right, well, so this is what they want to sound like. The next song would come along and I'm like, well, it's still obviously them, but why they're pulling this stuff from like late 60s, early 70s, kind of almost psychedelic rock, and as if it was always, once again, as if it was always supposed to be there. Like, it was me. I'm the problem here that I thought it shouldn't. Not easy to do, man. Really not easy to do.
No, and make it sound like a cohesive album that all kind of works together as well.
Which was your Diablo Swing Orchestra issue there,
I definitely went into this album expecting an album of swing metal, like a kind of Diablo Swing Orchestra. Hashtag sigh. And I ended up getting an album that not only has some utterly delicious groove riffs on it that'll have you headbanging along approvingly, but is also loaded with big choruses, musical hooks, but with just enough quirk and a ton of soul to it as well. The first couple of listens I had to this, the only criticism I had initially was, I was like, there's a kind of chunk in the middle, like tracks like 4 to 7. I was like, maybe the pace is maybe too similar with those tracks. You know, they kind of sit in a similar kind of tempo. And at first I was like, maybe just needs an injection of tempo in amongst those tracks. But the more I've listened to this, the less of an issue it's become, because the songs are so good. Like every one of those tracks has a hook or a delivery of emotion that's really hard.
There's a surprising amount of singles on this.
I get 100%. Yeah. And it's the same, like as you say, the rest of the album. I went through the album again today, like track by track, and every track there was a moment I was like, "You've just nailed it again on that track." Like even there's a moment on "I'm Holding On." Where they play Enter Sandman. I'm shitting you not. There's a Enter Sandman is played on that song, which I thought was like, that's fucking Enter Sandman. But I think it's on purpose. I think they've done it on purpose.
I'm sure it is. Yeah.
And just when I thought I'd found a track without like a standout moment on the Great Equalizer, I was like, mate, okay, this one's okay so far. And the end of the track comes and they hit you with this massive groove laden riff right at the end. I was like, oh my god, smiling from ear to ear. I was like, nope, this track's got it as well. And then the second last track, they play a track called It's Over. The second last track, I was like, all right, okay, I can see where you're going here. And that's kind of like, it's like Audio Slave meets Trepalium or something like that. And then they end the album, on like probably the most kind of eccentric track of the album, which is called Crack Open. But it kind of encapsulates the whole swing metal vibe. It's got the organs, it's got the brass, it's got the crazy rhythms. And then right at the end, they do this mad, like, kind of slowed down effect. And then it kind of fades back in and they play the same riff again, but it sounds like it's more kind of live or something right at the end rather than like a studio produced. I don't know if it was just kind of room mic'd or something that was recording it, but it sounds different when it comes back in, but it was cool as well. And there's a whole load of kind of, I'm assuming Norwegian at the end, which I would have asked Kyle about to kind of translate, but he's not here.
Yeah, he's learning about Klarna apparently.
But yeah, right up to the end, I was like hooked right to the end of the album. And I've listened to this album 7-8 times, something like that. And every time I listen to it, I'm like, every track has got a banger of a riff or a great hook or a really like meaningful bit of emotion on it. I love this. I think it's a fantastic album. Really do. What about yourself? What do you think? What do you make of this?
I'm not far off you, to be honest with you. Yeah. I think, to me, of the three of us, I think I'm the one that maybe most gravitates towards stuff that could be played with the more commercial swing to it. I don't want to use swing, but like more commercial bent, like essentially, like not saying radio friendly by any stretch of the imagination, but like I am more forgiving of that in the genre that we're in than used to are. And yeah, so like as soon as this kicks off and you get those big old like hooks, I was like, oh, we're in for something great here. But there's a roughness to the album that I really appreciate, because it's almost, on some level, it shouldn't sound as rough as it does for the stuff they're doing. This should be like Diablo Swing Orchestra is the great example of that, where everything is immaculately produced, like to the point where you imagine that someone spent like the best part of 17 hours making sure the horn bit was all fucking
overproduced though.
Yeah, I mean, like to the nth degree, like everything would if the French horn player scratched his nose, the microphone was picking it up. You know, it's that sort of level. Yeah. This has just got like a roughness about it that I really, really, really like. And you mentioned it before on the vocals as well. There are certain bits here where I feel like he's either too close to the mic or he's it's clipping.
Yeah.
But it just adds to the value for me. I think like those moments are the bits where I'm like they're just in it. They're just like they're in the zone. They're doing their thing. And, you know what? Yeah, that's what happens when you're in a room together playing. Like no one. I remember like used to watch like vocalists do the whole pull away the microphone. They're saying, I never fucking done that. They scream louder when the microphone's closer. Fuck them. You know, like there was that aspect as well. But then, and it is very easy to just like constantly praise the vocalist because he's incredibly talented. But I think you're right. I think when you lean back on what's happening underneath, that's the specialness behind the kind of Moorish quality of this, because he could very easily just sing that style over one genre of music and it'd be great. The fact that these guys are mixing lots of different influences, and once again, it's not it's not to predominantly change their core sound. It never does that. It is all these little infusions that they bring in, whether it's the end of a riff and they play something, or it's the actual chord progression, like is more akin to how they wrote music in the 70s, or like all these things that they do are just really, really interesting. And like, take the vocals out this. Yes, it's not going to be as special or magical, but the music would be very compelling nonetheless.
Yeah.
And they're all very, very, very talented. Like, just the kind of precisions and tightness of it just works really, really well. I found myself kind of like yourself, just kind of thinking to myself, I mean, you've like we talk about it, to get a track that has a hook that stays in your head for a couple of days after it. Like, you can probably, like, some bands can knock out one or two on an album, right?
Yeah.
To be able to do half the album with that, you're starting to kind of push it. 3/4 is rare. An album which is kind of just full of those standout moments, without at any point feel like it's too weighted towards trying to be too commercial or not commercial enough, or what. Like, they toe a line which is so fine that it's, you know, it's almost it's kind of jaw dropping. And then like you obviously you read that there's like a lineage of all these different acts, and they're seasoned musicians, but the fact that they're all coming from completely different levels and then coming in, or different genres, not levels, and coming in and then just creating something which is not the, once again, they're not the most original band you will ever hear, but they certainly are a band you've never heard, if that makes sense.
Yep.
They're playing stuff that you will have heard other groups do, but you've never heard it done this way, and a whole album of it. And that's kind of exciting, because you kind of feel like you're discovering something that's kind of special. Like you said, it's that putting the stamp of yourself, your personality, and your sound on something that you kind of almost take for granted. There's an easy way to take for granted that kind of hard rock, heavy metal or whatever has its lane and it sticks there, and there are certain bands that are able to kind of weave through and pull together all these things on one release. And then you get those influences, like you say, of kind of Americana stuff, a bit of New Orleans in there, tiny smidge a sludge in there in parts, rock, rhythm and blues, like just like all this stuff is just, it's merged comfortably in there. And then gospel backing singers, you know, organs ahoy. It's kind of difficult not to just kind of smile when you listen to this album, which is kind of how I felt all the way through it. I found it very difficult not to smile. It's incredibly Moorish. It's one of those ones that finishes and if you want to put on again, clothing optional. I mean, I almost kind of, there's part of me that feels kind of like the name and the press release could put people off, because you go in expecting like a Steel Panther or something like that, and that is not this band. So like, to me, like, this is incredibly gifted. The fun and quirk that they're having is obviously in the press stuff and the name of the band, but the music, and we said it before, the music is surprisingly serious. It's very, very, very well written. It's very well delivered. That's not to say there isn't humour in it. There is certainly humour in it, but it's they're legit. This is not a gimmick band. No. This is like a legit great album with great musicianship and phenomenal vocals. I mean, what more could you want?
Nothing.
Yeah.
Not a single thing. So, what would we rate this new album from Big Muff 68?
I knew you couldn't wait to see it.
I know.
I've not seen it once.
It's been a while. Like, I'd actually held it in for a bit.
Not seen it once.
This is a band that has personality in abundance, and as you say, it doesn't come off like a parody or like they're taking the piss, you know, like some other comedy metal bands we've reviewed in the past. And even the musical ideas aren't so ridiculous that it sounds comical. This is done with a bit of class and a bit of style. I think my first couple of listens I was like a 4 to 4.5, and I was still unsure about those kind of middle tracks. Now, like, I'm now at like 7-8 listens to the album. I'm all in. This is a 5 for me. I think it has everything has everything that I'd want from an album. And I can see myself going back to this a shitload this year. It's just, very feel good. But it's still, even though it's feel good and there's some kind of like, not radio friendly moments, but they're kind of catchy, and as there's a bit of rock in there, there's still a bit of metal in here.
Oh god, this is rough.
Yeah,
this is rough,
there's a lot of
bitch,
really cool riffs and a lot of kind of good kind of screaming vocals and stuff as well. So don't be put off by thinking, this is going to be a bit kind of too light for me. There's a hell of a lot of metal in here as well. I loved it. Actually, I don't have any issues with it at all at this point anymore. What about yourself? What are you thinking?
I'm marginally below you. I'm a 4.5. I think it's fucking great. I think it's like you said. Like, I hope people are not put off by the name. I think that's my only concern, is that, like I say, there's a bit of the parody in the way it's been packaged, which is, and maybe that's deliberate. Maybe that's to get you to wonder what these guys sound like. And if that's the case, I hope everyone does that. Because it's just so well written, so well crafted, so well put together, and different. Yeah. Whilst at the same time being something that feels very familiar. It's just they have their own lane that they're doing, and I know they're all obviously busy doing other things. I would like to hope that this is a continuation that goes on, because like, even if you got one of these albums every 5 years, it's fucking worth the wait, man. Really, really, really good. 4.5.
Nice. Big Muff 68 and Swing Metal, I had to say it again, out on the 6th of May on Mas-Kina Recordings. I'll put links below to the band's Facebook, to the Bandcamp. Check these guys out, give them a listen, give them a shot. It's hard to get a gauge at the moment with the singles that are out, because each track sounds so different. They've got a bit of different, something different on each track. So even if you've heard one track and you think, not too sure, give it a listen. The whole album is fantastic.
Album ties it together. I've obviously not heard those singles, but there's no massive jumps between songs. So I think the album must weave very well between those styles. So.
Yeah, for sure. Let us know what you think. Have a listen. Stick some comments in below. Happy to hear your thoughts and opinions on it. That's the review. Thanks for checking it out. We'll be back with another review very soon, but until then, take care. Speak to you soon.
Bye, everyone.
Whoa, it was time for variation, alternation, balance out of care, detection of a failed existence, no